it really has to be a holistic approach. And I find that almost nobody talks about influence, yet it's one of the core things that's really created the Family Office Club and allowed us to succeed. So just like the last workshop, you've probably already been to, everything that we talk about here, we are using day to day. For example, in the field of influence, they've proven, scientifically proven, that somebody is more influential if they're seen as more of an authority. And if somebody else reads off some of your credentials, it comes off as more credible and your authority status goes up rather than reading your own credentials and reading off bullet points about yourself. That's why in part we had Andres come up here to introduce myself as just an example of that. I want to, throughout today, just be 100% transparent, to point out different things we do to be more influential, just give lots of little examples. Sometimes a few of them might be a little bit repetitive. That's to drive the point home that these are very practical things. And this is not about a self-help or a sales type seminar of how one person does it. The principles today are proven principles, where they've done scientific studies at universities and shown that these strategies do work. And then our job is to interpret them to the investment industry, to investor relations, to raising capital. And then your job is to take it another half turn to how to use it exactly for yourself and implement it moving forward. But just some examples leading up to this workshop you might have seen. If you got an email yesterday that said final chance to attend, that is using the influence principle of scarcity. That if you don't decide now, the workshop's going to come and go, and you'll miss the workshop, and it's just happening once in the next 3 months. So that's an example of scarcity in use. The books, as you came in, is something that was not mentioned on the website, but we're giving you a free book if you'd like one by the registration table. That's an example of reciprocation. You give somebody something, they automatically want to give you something back in return. The clothes that I choose to wear, the color of the clothes, the venue location, the view outside of the cityscape, you don't have to hide it behind drapes with a projector. All the different things that we do have some element of at least considering how that's going to impact the audience, how it's going to impact somebody on the email list, etc. So throughout the day, you'll see many examples of this that I'm going to keep on bringing up. You probably saw in the emails leading up to the workshop that this is our 107th event, and it's the 36th full-day workshop we've done just for capital raisers. We do a lot of investor summits as well. And just talking about doing 107 of these events shows consistency. It shows we've been in the space a long time. It shows that we're committed to the space, and it's scientifically proven that those who are very consistent and committed are more influential. Those are all things that if you look back to a couple of the emails of what got you here, after the content today, you'll see use of the principles in many different areas in it. All right, so just a quick disclaimer. Just like with any presentation you'd see in the investment management industry, the jurisdiction you're in, the legal entity you run, the strategies you're offering, the types of investors you're talking to, how you talk to them, through what venues and mediums, et cetera, all changes, regulations, and compliance concerns. So we're gonna, I don't wanna have to say this on every slide, we're just saying it once up front. It should go unsaid, but basically what we talk about has to be taken carefully in terms of breaking any compliance rules, because we're gonna give examples from all different industries all over the world throughout today. Some maybe you might be able to implement today, or you might have to go through the burden of registering with a federal entity, registering with the state first, or filing something with the government in order to follow the strategy. All right, many of you have been to at least one of our events before, but this shows the 24 events we're hosting this year. And when you see the image of a city, that means it's an investor summit, which we call our deal flow summits. And at those, you'll see 23 to 28 investors speaking on stage, and then usually 5 or 6 sponsors speaking on stage. But in one day at the investor summits, you get to hear from 25 plus investor opinions on how they're structuring deals, what they're investing in, what deal flow they're looking at, how they manage risk in their portfolio, how they structure debt deals, and the audience gets to ask them questions. We try to ask every single investor on stage, what are you looking for right now? And what do you want to get out of the room deal flow-wise? These are not paid speakers who are famous speakers. These are family offices that typically don't speak at a lot of events in most cases. And by having them on stage, you're able to ask what they want. So you can make a positive business connection, but also just see how they think, so that other family offices you go to, you kind of in line with what their expectations are. The other events that are workshops, you'll see is Capital Raising Catalyst, Investor Influence, Market Material Mastery. Those are ones where it's going to be intensive training workshop where we go through 70, 100 slides. We try to have you do some small group exercises so you walk away with a lot of practical insights and actions that you can take. Our goal is to really transform how you're raising capital and working with investors, to change your processes and to change your whole mindset of how to go about attracting new investor relationships. And we look at this as when you log into, say, Netflix, if you're one of the 140 million subscribers that they have globally, you'll see they're always adding new titles. And they might have some old titles in there as well. So we're always adding every year new cities. We did 11 events 2 years ago. Last year we did 17. This year we're doing 24. Next year we'll do 30 to 35. So we're always in more events being on the calendar in more cities, so that you can look 6 months out and schedule which events you want to come to. We hope that when you have a meeting in New York or Chicago, San Francisco, you can line it up with one of our workshops coming up, because we are 6 months out, so when you plan your travel, hopefully it coincides so that somebody on your team could be attending at least one event per quarter, if not two. In the member portal, we have interviews recorded with over 350 investors now. So if you'd like to hear what these investors are looking for, how they structure their deals, all of those insights are in there. About 10 times as much content as you'd get by coming to one conference. You can be streaming right from your computer, or your team member can, without the travel cost. We also are live streaming this event. We live stream all of our events now. And in addition to that, we have HD recordings of the events in case you need to leave early today for some reason. Included in your membership is our family office certification, a capital raising certification. If you don't want somebody from your team to come to a live event, you can have them just complete the certification perhaps. We also have a free investor relations software management. It's like a free CRM solution that we can get you connected to. And Jennifer can help you with that. You probably met her at registration. And then I think the most unique thing we provide is something that others might charge $1,000 or $2,000 for, and that is that every month on the 15th of the month, I download everybody who over the past 30 days have submitted their materials, and I'll do a 4 or 5 page analysis of your materials and just provide suggestions on what to consider changing, how to get more investor leads, branding changes, one-liner, feedback, pitch deck feedback, etc. And you can do that once a quarter. So every quarter, you can get your new version of materials over to me. I download all of them. I usually do 20 or 30 of these analyses per month. And then I send you that feedback back to you, because one weakness of this workshop is we're not going to get time to speak at great length one-on-one. So interpreting some of this, I hope if you have questions, you raise your hand throughout the day at any time. But there isn't that one-on-one kind of coaching element here. And I can't do one-on-one coaching in person at my office or over the phone, but I can do it by having these downloaded, and then once a month I analyze them all and give the feedback. And we found that to be very helpful. When we started doing those, we literally would just write 7 bullet points of feedback. And then I realized there were some very common mistakes and some additional areas that could be helpful to people on, so we started doing a 1-page feedback. And now we have a 4 to 5 page structure, so we're looking at about 30 different things within your materials to give you customized feedback on what you might want to change. So I hope many of you will use that, because it's absolutely free. If you're here today, then you just log into the portal. The login details are on the front of the workbook you got today on how to figure out the first name, last name combination for your password. Use logins, push submit your materials, and put them in there. And then that way, when I speak to you at an event like this, if you follow up via email, I'll know who you are and what you're looking for. And in some cases, we've been able to make a helpful connection for different family office club members to each other. Right, so I wanted to show a few things that I think make us unique in hosting workshops like this. There's really 3 different perspectives we're bringing to the table. First is as a capital raiser. I've been a placement agent. I've raised capital for third-party fund managers. My first job raising capital was for a high-tech company that needed angel investors. I have a capital raising experience to know how hard it is, and that's what led me to creating the Family Office Club. And now after running 107 live events, many of which we had 20, 30 investors on stage for at our 1,000-person Family Office Super Summit here We had about 75 investors on stage. We've heard from literally 1,000 plus family offices on what they want, what they don't want, how they like to be approached, how they like to be pitched, what they ignore, what's important to them. And I think that second perspective is really the bird's eye view of what all the investors are saying over the past decade, consistently that they want, that they see as a gap in the market, and then also consistently seeing from that same perspective who's raising 100 million plus a year versus raising nothing, or struggling to raise $3 million a year, and then seeing the commonalities and the golden threads of those who are doing very well out there in the marketplace. And then the third perspective is really this bottom part of the slide. We have signed agreements with over 23, I think it's 24 or 25 now, families worth over $100 million net worth each. And those families all came to us. Is the most important part about this slide for this workshop, is that we didn't cold call any of these families. They cold called us, and they came to us, and they emailed us, and they asked for help on something. They inquired about a question on governance, or setting up a family office, and they showed some examples of that in a couple minutes. I think that's very important to realize. That's the motivation to actually be employing all the strategies that we're talking about here today. We do have 2 clients that are around the $30 million, $50 million level, but 90% of our clients are 100 million plus. We've just found that if you're worth $100 million or more, you're already paying for a family office, whether you have one or not, through this lost efficiency. You're managing too much stuff yourself, so you can't make progress on your operating business or your real estate developments, or your time would be better spent meeting with somebody who could invest $5 or $10 million rather than dealing with service providers and counterparties who aren't family office quality. And I think that the whole goal of today is to reverse the flow, to get these types of clients cold calling you or cold emailing you, or whatever your investor target set is, whatever your investor avatar is. For anyone coming into the room, we've got a lot of chairs open on the front halves of the table, of each of the tables. I do want to point out, just as another example, when kind of showing who the Family Office Club is, that they have shown that publications improve your authority, and showing the publications that we have written here and that they are relevant to the space make it practical, but also boost our authority in positioning what I'm about to present today, and showing that we have committed to producing so much thought leadership within a single industry of really capital raising and family offices also shows that long-term commitment and consistency. And a lot of what investors are looking for is who can they have high conviction in, who can they trust, who has de-risked the relationship so it's easier to meet with them or to allocate, they feel comfortable. And a lot of that comes through consistency, conviction, and commitment. Also, we're going to be talking about social proof, showing how other families have worked with us, and showing examples of families that are our clients is another influence principle of just showing that we are active in the marketplace and that this isn't our first time working with a family of that nature. When I was at Harvard, I did a thesis study on psychology and psychology of influence, and I studied Robert Cialdini's influence principles there. So I'm going to be bringing some of that knowledge and insights into the room here today. That was in 2009. 2001, 2002 is when I first started studying influence, though, and really it's changed everything in my life by studying it. And I just find it very strange that you can get an MBA in marketing and never study this. You can get a master's in business or an undergraduate degree and never be required to take a course on listening or influence or effective communication. And to me, it's just so central to doing well in business and communicating value that, you know, it's just too bad that they don't teach it more, because it would be helpful, but because they don't, it makes it more helpful to be here today, because you'll have a marked advantage against others who have never spent even 1 hour of their life thinking about the things we're going to talk about today. And I'm really interested when there's a really well-known, public persona or an expert. It could be a sales trainer, it could be a self-help, publisher that maybe became very popular because people liked the idea or liked the fact that their ideas actually worked. And then when that can be proven scientifically in university studies over and over again, that what they were teaching has actually been shown to be for sure true, I especially like when we can talk about concepts like that, because it makes it more familiar on how to implement some of these ideas. So here's a picture of Napoleon Hill. Most of you know his book, Think and Grow Rich. And one of the things that he talks about is specialized knowledge and how regular knowledge is not worth very much at all. It's commoditized. It's only specialized knowledge that individuals want. And it's true when putting together an investment partnership. Somebody might want to access your specialized knowledge on investing in self-storage or investing in fast food casual or in mineral rights. Someone might want your specialized knowledge for capital raising or investor relations or managing a family office. Almost nobody wants the generic knowledge, and they've shown now and they've proven that the authority positioning is really showing on one level that you're highly specialized in one very specific thing. And when you're very consistent at something, it shows that you're highly specialized in that one thing. So that's what today is all about. That's what our workshops are all about, is to boost the level of specialized capital raising knowledge you have, so that through the 3 workshops in Capital Con, you're armed with an arsenal of tools, resources, strategies, ways to react differently than others would, ways to kind of provide genuine value to a potential investor or make things more tangible to them faster, and to de-risk the relationship with them. And I found that if you can grow your specialized knowledge in capital raising and investor relations, you are quite likely to be worth $300,000 to $500,000 a year or $1 million a year long term if you can connect that specialized knowledge with results for an investment firm. Kind of the market rate for someone experienced in that who is decently good at it is $300,000 plus a year in compensation. So it's a very highly desired skill set across different types and sizes of investment management firms. Today here in the room, we have people that came because they want to be raising more capital, and they've already raised $500 million. They've already raised over $1 billion. We have several of you here in the room at that level. We also have people here that have never raised any capital, and then we have a lot in the middle who have raised $5 to $10 million last year, and you're looking to accelerate that. So this slide I showed at the other workshop as well. This is really my cost of being here. I just live about 6 minutes down the road here in Key Biscayne, but all of you spent something to get here time-wise, but also you could have taken the day off and done something fun. You could have, got those 200 emails knocked out and did some phone calls that maybe would be productive for sure. So we appreciate you being here, and we're going to move through a lot of different ideas today, just like at the last workshop, so that we maximize the time here together. But also, in January, we did 4 workshops. We had 500 or 600 people at those. And in one of the workshops, we had 3 or 4 times as many questions as the other ones. And I would just encourage you to be asking a lot of questions throughout the day so that you get more out of being here today. If you're wondering something, then go ahead and just raise your hand and ask it. And I'll repeat your question so everybody can hear it. And then there'll be others in the room, I'm sure, that would benefit from the question that you asked. We do have probably 15 slides out of the 120 that are the exact same as the Catalyst program. That's not an accident. It's because those are very important and they're fundamental and they're core to being able to raise capital. Without those things, where there's overlap, then you really have an anchor that you're dragging behind you if you haven't figured them out. So by the end of the day, if you find yourself saying, oh, well, he's already talked about this slide at the other workshop, make sure that you have those down and you have an answer for what you're doing related to that area. We're going to be talking all day about influence, but why care about influence? Why does it exist? Why do we need it? The core of it is that there's more information flowing all the time. We're all bombarded with more information we can possibly analyze. And if somebody recommends that you check out a restaurant, you might type in the restaurant name in your phone, and maybe on Apple Maps it comes up and you see a number of Yelp reviews or some other type of review on the restaurant. And maybe since your friend recommended it and it comes out 4 out of 5 stars with 900 reviews, you just go. You might not even look at the menu first, as long as you're familiar with the food type, and you just go based on that. You don't have time to read the reviews. That's influence at work, because the stars showed you social proof, which reinforced the referral over from your friend. The same with, we gave the example at the last workshop about an Amazon book that somebody recommends. The book title draws you in a little bit, and the reviews are high, then that might bring you in. If the book just looks low quality and the reviews are bad, and then you might not purchase that book. And it's the same thing with investors who are trying to analyze a lot of investments, figure out what emails to answer. Everybody has too many things coming at them. So if you send them a 45-page pitch deck and they don't know who you are, then they're going to maybe open that on the first page, maybe you have the year that you published it or who you created it for and the name of your firm. Maybe it says Wilson Capital. The second page might be a disclosure page, and then a table of contents. You've exhausted them before they even know what you do. And many times people send emails with an essay written in them, and no one has time to read that essay. They want to read a sentence or two and figure out whether it's worth opening your one pager. Is it worth really taking time to even respond to you, saying no thank you? And if you kind of disrespected their time by writing way too much and attaching a 60-page pitch deck, you know, they might be less likely to feel like you deserve an answer of no thanks, this is not for us, because they can't get their arms around what you're doing. Whereas if you have a one-liner and a one-pager, they can flip that open, see it, and it grabs them and makes them lean forward, then that can make all the difference in catching their attention. And at our investor summits, you'll hear individuals say that you have 15 seconds, you have one sentence, you have half of a voicemail to get my attention, otherwise I'm moving on. And whether or not they keep accurate stats on how many emails they get per day, you'll hear some of them say, we get 50, we get 200, one person said they get 1,000 emails a day. I didn't know that was possible, but like a lot of family offices get a lot of pitches is the point, and they get pitches from your competition. Every one of you has a lot of competition, so figuring out what investors value, what your target investors value, what your competitors offer, and where you're different is what the whole analysis part of the Catalyst Workshop was about. And hopefully you've had some time to do some of that analysis now. But making sure that you are leveraging those 15 seconds that you have to get someone's attention is really important, and it will be ever more important as time goes on, because there'll be more competition. Well-known investors will be getting more pitches every year. More people will find out that these family offices exist or this private investor exists that you're also pitching. And at the crux of it is the fact that the person who created their wealth in manufacturing is not an expert on multifamily, even though they might invest in it. So on some level, there's a leap of faith, and there has to be a de-risking, that they're going to believe that they invest in your residential development strategy or in your fast casual food business, that, okay, it looks like a credible team, I understand how the business works, I see the unique value, I see the gap in the marketplace, because besides Chipotle or maybe the sweet greens like in New York or something, there's not many healthy fast casuals offerings in many cities, etc., then there has to be a leap of faith, because they're not going to be able to analyze your recipes or double check your nutritional facts being accurate, or interview your chef and really know what a valuable school was they were supposed to go to. And that is true with every field of investment. Even for an investor who created their wealth in your exact niche, you're going to have a higher level of specialization there, and on some level it's going to come down to trusting who you are, your process, your team, etc. And in short, to summarize this slide, with 400,000 scientific journals being published every year, and that number only going up, the level of depth that you're expected to have on the small niche area you're carving out for yourself has to be great, but there'll always be a dichotomy between that and the level of understanding that your investor can have, and it's your job to bridge that in the way that's most appropriate for your target investor. One thing I want to point out, again, is that the principles and things we're going to be going through here are just scientifically proven by studies in a couple of influence books, such as this one. The book looks thick, but the back 100 pages are all just references to scientific studies. So I'm not going to put 100 slides of scientific study references up here. I'm going to mention some books, and if you want to go see the studies and say, oh, how can you say that, or I want to see that study, I don't know if they're statistically relevant, etc., there's plenty of raw material I can point you to, for sure. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we go through all these strategies today. The real motivation to master this on a very basic level, at least, is so that you can get more responses, better conversion rate, more meetings, more voicemails returned, more investors closed, and each of you have a different bottleneck in your investor relations business. You could be very good at getting investor leads, or maybe that's what you're working on as step number one. You could be very good at engaging them, but then it's hard to get them to take action. It's hard to de-risk things enough and then motivate them to actually allocate to your strategy. All of us have different challenges, and we're at different stages of development, and we're going to talk about all those different stages here today. Just like we talked about at the Catalyst Workshop, there is no one influence principle that solves everything, but there is one that's superior. We're going to talk about that just after lunch. So we are going to give you one principal where if you invest more energy in that principal, it's going to give you a higher ROI than trying to implement 50 different strategies. Also, like you mentioned, the Catalyst Workshop, coming in first is very important. So I think we need these types of strategies we're talking about today, because coming in second, third, or fourth might mean the difference between getting an allocation or not. It might be a difference of $10 million versus zero. And just getting one family office on board could mean a lot. A lot of individuals are here in the room have raised capital from referrals and private investors, and your average investor may have put in $100,000, $300,000 at a time to date. But if you could just find two family offices, they might allocate $3 million or $5 million each, and be worth finding 10 or 20 of the other investors. And it can add credibility, they can open additional doors, teach you what it's like to work with a family office, and then hopefully through membership in the family office club and just one or two family office investors coming in, you can really propel things to the next level and bridge yourself from the private investor space to institutional by using the family office industry for that. We're not going to talk much today about getting the basics in order for your marketing materials, for your capital raising. At Marketing Material Mastery, we're going to talk more about that, but it kills the credibility and it will hurt your ability to influence others if you don't have those in place. So it's kind of table stakes just to be taken seriously, because other people will judge that how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if I was the person who answered the phone when you called the office, and I was the person who checked you in at the front table, and then I gave the 2-minute warning, and then I'm fiddling with the video camera, and then I'm also doing the workshop and cleaning up the equipment afterwards, you'd assume that, okay, this person's like a startup, hasn't done it for very long, doesn't have a team, doesn't have any support, or he's just not thinking strategically that, he should just focus on what he does and have his team help him with the other parts. And you get judged on all those types of things just subconsciously, whether you like it or not, and whether the other person is consciously thinking it or not all of the time. And they're scientifically proven that. It's not whether you're a judgmental person or not. We are all judgmental people, and that's the whole point of the presentation here today, is that we're all instantly judging things in our environment around us. And I'm encouraging those who go and try to complete the circle of capital raising workshops to really flip the energy investment. Instead of spending 80% of your time reaching out to potential investors, reaching out, is to at least short term spend 80% on positioning, on getting these influence principles implemented, on figuring out how you can do things more effectively and efficiently, because that will help you sharpen the saw and just gain a long-term edge. Just spending 3 hours of your life just meditating on a position you have in front of the investors you want to get could pay dividends for a decade to come. And most people just never spend time on this, I've found. And importantly to point out, some people don't spend any time on that, and they still raise hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. But this isn't something that I'm telling you should do, and it costs $100,000. This just takes your time. And all of us spend the time to come here today. There's no reason you can't spend another half day, a day, thinking about everything we're talking about today and implementing it and making it real for you. And the advantage is that almost nobody does. I think if you complete the circle of the capital raising workshops, it will help you find the unfair advantage, but it's going to be unique to each of you. A lot of individuals come up to me and say, hey, how can I find investors for my real estate offering or for my operating business? And I really appreciate it more when someone submits their capital raising audit through the member portal. So I can read your bio, I can read through all your materials, I can see where you're based, I can see what you're currently doing and who you're speaking to in those materials and give you an answer in context. But without knowing you, I don't know if you're already tied into a certain community. I don't know if you used to be a practicing dentist, or maybe you still own 4 dental locations and you just didn't happen to mention that. You got bored of that and your team runs that now and you're doing something else. That's totally different than, oh, you're based in Singapore and you happen to like performance driving or something like that, or you happen to be in a field that's really growing in Southeast Asia. So the context of which you're coming to in your background needs to be part of the customization of how you implement everything here today. And it's a combination of what we talked about at the Catalyst Workshop, or what you will see when coming to that, if this is your first one, with what we talked about today in Marketing Material Mastery that's going to provide that advantage. And it's the cross-pollination and the interaction of those different ideas that's going to create the most unique edge. And so in my case, it's positioning and having enough experience and knowledge and abilities in positioning but also knowing enough about family offices and having enough experience there that together we're able to create the Family Office Club and have the #1 most visited website in the space, the most listened to podcast, the most purchased paperback book, is because I have enough expertise in those two areas. The combination of those two areas is what creates the power. It's not just having a lot of knowledge in family offices or a lot of knowledge in positioning. So for each of you, that context is going to be different. And it's the unique combination of disparate fields that creates something unique and powerful. And the reason why we show the bear is that if you spend time positioning yourself where the water is flowing in the lake, so the fish are jumping towards you, instead of going straight to the lake and just splashing around trying to find a fish or two, it's just much more effective of a process and more enjoyable. So that's what a lot of our strategies are about. So that's a picture of me maybe 7 or 8 years ago. That's my wife there. And the reason I have this slide up, I just want to show the number of different ways that influence has totally changed everything in my life. First of all, I started studying this in college. Actually, I'd already gotten my MBA done, and then was doing master's level psychology courses through the Harvard ALM program, living in Harvard Square, and learned a lot about influence there, and just saw, while raising capital at the same time, how it was very naturally related. And while not having written anything myself, I used thought leadership other people had written in their own authority tools, put them together in a folder, and then went to a wealth management firm network that had many different financial advisors. And just because of that helpful resource, they saw me as a helpful counterparty. And by providing their advisors with thought leadership, they reciprocated and gave me full contact details and told me which advisors to call on to sell our hedge fund and SMA products to. So it was a form of reciprocation, but also positioning almost as I was connected to all this expertise, even though I hadn't produced it myself. And that was an early trigger of what's going on and how this could work. I also saw very early on that spending a lot of time on getting that one-page resume, as great as I could, just had an immediate impact on how I could get doors opened at Goldman Sachs, or getting a job at a placement agency raising capital when I never raised capital before, etc. And I think that triggered something in my brain. While studying influence, I was actually able to meet my wife using some of these principles. So that's a whole other story, perhaps. But it works at every psychological level, whether you're buying a new suit at Saks Fifth Avenue, or whether you're buying a car, or whether you're selling your house, or you're closing a $50 million deal. These principles are relevant in every part of life, including bringing up children. The launch of my business was really focused a lot around influence, and it happened on accident because I was just publishing online what I was learning while meeting with family offices, because I wanted to teach myself, just because selfishly I wanted to be better at it and be able to meet with more of them. I wasn't doing it to get attention or to get leads or to start a business. I was just sharing what I was learning online. And while doing that, we started getting 10 hits a day, 50 hits a day, a couple hundred hits a day to the website. It grew to 1,000 hits a day. And as it grew to 3,000 hits a day, I got on the front page of the Boston Globe. I started getting invited to speak in Belgium, in Moscow, and Cayman Islands, etc. And it really led to a point where my reputation had grown through providing information first, and people appreciated that. So they would be asking me to speak, asking me for consulting. And my then boss didn't like that, who ran the placement agency firm. So they said, you got to shut down this blog of yours or quit the job. And at that point I said, well, this thing's kind of taken off, so I'll quit the job and go work in a different placement agency that doesn't mind that I have that out there. I'm not saying that we guarantee investments. I'm not selling anything. I'm just writing about the industry. And while looking for another job, I got a job offer. But between those 4 months of quitting the one and getting an offer from the next, the website, the blog I had grown was bringing in $5,000, $7,000 a month already, and I was only doing that part time. So I said, well, let me try this out for 1 year, and I just spent 1 year kind of digging into it and experimenting with it, and we were able to grow it to 300,000 plus in revenue the first year in business, and then 500,000-600,000, and then over $1 million a year after our third complete year. And a lot of it was around positioning and around authority, and it really taught me how powerful that was, that on accident this thing had taken momentum because of positioning. I had read a lot about influence while starting the business, and a lot about choke points, which you might have heard of at our last workshop. If any of you weren't at that and you want to read about them, there's a great book called Mastering Rockefeller Habits that talks about choke points. And they can be a very inexpensive way of getting great momentum in your space. And I found while doing that a a lot of what I was doing was just interpreting marketing, sales, leadership, self-improvement, influence and persuasion strategies, and interpreting those for the investment management world. And I found that the only reason it works is because most of the individuals in investment management come from a background of risk management, of real estate development, of deal making, maybe they were an analyst in their skill of analysis or negotiation. Most of them had not even studied those areas, much less taken the time to transport that information into investor relations and capital raising. And because of that, it was very helpful in making progress in the space. I was able to go from having no investors and no debt to now produce somewhere between $15 and $20 million of revenue. We've spent about $3 million on advertising. But the difference between that, I think a lot of it is accounted for by these influence and persuasion principles. So in other words, we're able to put in effort at the beginning. We didn't advertise at all, and get an ROI through influence, and then also be able to then spend advertising and get a positive ROI because it was leveraging these principles. And as you heard Andres say, who knows who the top 5 or top 10 thought leaders are on capital raising or family offices, but we have a lot of objective numbers to say that we've achieved that within certain categories at least. And we're looking to do that over the next 20 years. And I hope you'll see at this workshop and after, and looking back at emails we've sent before, just the influence principles at work on how we're going about that. So that you see that we're doing everything that we're teaching you at these workshops. And every year, we're doing something new and different to apply them. So if you come to this workshop 6 months from now or 2 years from now, there'll be different examples on stage. I have different examples today than I had at our workshops in Q4 last year, because we're doing different things to attract investors. Because remember, we're trying to get $100 million plus families to cold call us, but we're not offering commercial real estate or an operating business or self-storage. We're offering to help them start their single family office or help them formalize their direct investment program. And that's really it. And I'm sure that's something different than all of you here in the room. So that's why we openly share everything we do, because we just get it even deeper within our systems when we do so. So I wanted to show a few things just to make it very real and tangible. So it's not just a couple bullet points up here. I got to go to Spain to speak, Liechtenstein, Monaco, been to many times. I went to Moscow, to Red Square, and found out nobody knew what a family office was when speaking there in family offices. Just about everybody invests in commercial real estate, office parks, multifamily, and they don't trust financial institutions. They don't trust wealth management organizations. It's very underbanked because of that. And while I was spending time in Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, I found the same thing, is that compared to the United States, where if you're worth 10 million plus, everybody wants to be your private banker. In Singapore, I gave one talk, and someone said, I've got $40 million, can you help me manage it? I said, no, we don't do that. He said, no, I trust you, please manage it for me. I need help with my money. And he was just sitting on $40 million in cash and needed help. That really doesn't happen in the United States very often. And seeing how family offices were growing all over the world through these experiences helped grow our perspective and just get more dug into the family office industry. This is Nice, went to as well. I went to Prague, Paris, met with family offices there, spoke at family office events. This is Zug. And the point of showing that is I want it to be real, that everything changed using influence in my life. So this is a diagram of the 4 different workshops that we offer. Capital Raising Catalyst, probably 70% of you have been to that workshop. Some of you just a few weeks ago. This is Investor Influence. We then have Marketing Material Mastery, which is going to be going through all of your materials, every single piece, considerations, tweaks, and things that are not by themselves rocket science, but if you don't spend the time doing them, then no one's going to really get what you do if you haven't spent the time boiling it down, creating the key diagrams, to show your unique value process, having the right types of materials. You're not sending a 45-page pitch deck to try to get somebody just to take a quick phone call or a coffee meeting with you. They don't follow just 10-minute talks. from capital raising experts. Some of them have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, some have raised billions of dollars. Some are placement agents, some run their own fund, some run their own real estate development firm. You'll hear a great diversity of perspectives at that workshop. Does anyone have questions on any of these 4 events before I move on? One of the influence principles is that people remember things that are not complete yet. And so when you're moving through a process and it's not complete, it hangs in your brain. And that's part of the reason to show complete the circle. We don't say that at the Catalyst workshop, that's not what it's about. But people like to complete processes. They're driven to complete something that they have started. Otherwise, they feel like it's an open-ended project and it lingers in their head. And they've shown that somebody's memory is much better if you are, for example, a lot of famous writers will write 1,000 words a day or 2,000 words a day, and they'll stop at exactly 2,000 words in the middle of the paragraph, or middle of the sentence. And the very next day, they'll be able to pick up and still be in the flow of writing because they were mid-thought, and that thought will still be in their head. And they're telling themselves, I can't forget that, because I was in the middle of writing that second half of the paragraph. And that's what helps them get started writing the next day. And they've shown that waiters who are serving food at a table, when the food's not all at the table yet, it's still in the front of their brain and still remembering what needs to be delivered. But then once all the food's delivered, they can't recall 5 minutes later who ordered what. Their brain now has released that part of energy, trying to keep that front of their mind. And that is why we say complete the circle, because we want this to be a loop that you guys close. I think it de-risks the relationship between us if you're able to come to CapitalCon, if you're able to dial up your marketing materials, and you'll get a diversified ROI out of your membership by completing these 4. So it's in both of our best interests that you guys close this loop. But I just want to be transparent. That's why we put this up here, is so that you do come to the 4 events. All right. A lot of individuals come here, and they're raising capital by doing this middle section here, just proactive reach outs and getting meetings. And the point of our 4 workshops is to get you to do these other things at a much higher degree. A lot of us are part of 1 or 2 communities that have been helpful, but dialing in what investor you're targeting, getting involved with more, can really propel the amount of relationships you have going forward. You'll see as we talk today that being in the right communities allows you to very quickly find things in common with other people in those communities. If you've chosen communities where there's qualified individuals there, because the membership is $20,000 a year, or $50,000 a year, or whatever level you're at, maybe you have to start at $7,000 a year in a community that you join, then you're able to more quickly find similarities and build rapport, and it's shown and proven that you're more influential when you find things in common with someone else. Positioning strategies, you're more authoritative when you position yourself well. On proactive reach outs, we're going to show how you can enact reciprocation and scarcity by doing so. Choke points are often points of distribution or ways to get leads for new relationships. And then operating within the business can give you unique insights, which again, you could use for reciprocation, and it can make you scarce because you could be the only investment management firm which actually also operates in the space, so you have frontline information. And also it can make you an authority on the space because they might have more confidence that you really know what you're talking about, because all you do is this one thing and you do it from 3 different angles, so you're very focused on it and you have different perspectives to reflect on it. I want to comment on this slide about how you have to have roads, you have to have relationships to close investors, but I want to talk about it from the influence and persuasion perspective. They've shown and scientifically proven that the bond between you and the individual you're talking to, the connection that they have, that they feel, is twice as likely to influence the sale as the actual merits of the thing that you're selling to somebody. In the investment management industry, there's a lot of numbers that have to match up. There's a lot of qualifiers. They might not even take a meeting with you. But if you go into a meeting and you get a meeting and they're meeting with 10 other people that week that also pass that screen, then I think the relationship part is going to play that 2 times factor over your IRR percentage. And that's why we're always stressing that the relationship you build first is what's most important, not running around and showing them that you have the most amazing investment on planet Earth. They want to know that you are focused, that you're consistent, that you're the authority to work with on the niche. And we want to help you build systematic and natural ways to build new investor relationships. And I think that if you can break this apart and figure out what does that mean to have a investor come in and allocate and break that down to different stages of the relationship, then you can apply these principles in all different ways that are just natural to you. Things you're already doing. You don't do anything differently in terms of activity, but just do them through the lens of influence, and they can be modified to be much more effective. At the Catalyst workshop, we talk about how you want to be top of mind, first in mind, and we talk about how if you are thought of first, you'll get more referrals, you'll get the meeting first, you'll get the introduction. And Jay Abraham is one of the smartest marketing persons alive today, and he's got about 50 years of marketing experience and has done several $1 billion in revenue with his companies that he's helped build. And he has this idea of preeminence, and it's really being above or before others or superior. And the most important thing about this is that you're trying to be superior to your specific investor avatar, maybe just in your region, and that's all that matters. You don't need to go very broad, especially if you're just getting started. If you have a large team and a lot of resources, then you can go broad. But trying to figure out how you can be preeminent and be number one in your space is one of the best ROIs on your time. This is an example of, we're going to show a few examples of how this has worked for us, the preeminence idea. And centimillionaires.com is one of our websites. And at the bottom of this page, and at the top of the text, it says it. At the bottom of the page, there's little icons. And we're basically giving people access to a data room where they get these 8 resources at no cost. They just fill out this 2-question form here, put in their name and email and phone number. And in return for doing that, they're getting the book in the data room full of resources. And I want to show this up front before I get into some of the principles, just to show how practical it is to implement some of these things. In that it works for sure. It doesn't cost a lot of money to set up, and it can be very, very niche focused. And so we have gotten, just in the last 6 weeks, probably 10 or 20 inquiries from this website and our singlefamilyoffices.com website to help people start their family office. And I want to show and make it really practical how that works. So we use HubSpot for a CRM, and we had this opt-in come in on January 26th, just about 10 days ago. It just says, considering establishing a family office. And they submitted the form. Their contact details are below here where you can't see it. We had this one come in January 18th, starting the family office. And they put their name and contact details, and then I emailed them and set up a call. This one come in January 12th, which you can see the dates on all these here on the email thing. It says, keen to have your views on institutionalizing our single family office. This one came in late December. They're looking for a proposal for their family trust and estate tax planning. 5th example, they're looking to open their family office in Vero Beach. This one looking to start a multifamily office. And this one, I just downloaded, I want to download the 50 kickoff questions. So at this one, they had read or had seen a webinar or come to one of our events or read one of our books where we just give away the 50 questions that we ask our clients when they become a client to help them start their single family office. We don't know what to do for them until we know their context. And that's why when someone comes up and says, how do I raise capital for my self-storage deal? It gives them some random suggestions, but without the context, it's not going to be very helpful. Same with the family office. When they have a liquidity event, I need to get to know who they are. And we just give away those 50 questions in a Word document so they can start to complete them just for themselves or for whoever they're working with, or in case they want to work with us. And that way they know that they're thinking about many different angles for their situation. And you could have something like this as a giveaway that's totally different. It could be questions to ask yourself before investing in commercial real estate. It could be questions to ask yourself before investing in a startup. It could be that you have a lot of access to angel investors or private investors that for whatever reason always invest in startups, and you could show them the value of considering investing in lower middle market instead in a less risky potential area. So the point of showing all that is I want to de-risk any of you thinking that we just run the events and we don't actually work with families or we're not using these strategies all day long. And centimillionaires.com as a website didn't exist before the 15th of December. And this book didn't exist before the first week in December. So it's all new stuff we're doing, but we have been marketing our how to start a family office resources of singlefamilyoffices.com for the last 2 or 3 years. And the goal here is to make it so that you also are getting 10 20 investor inquiries every month, or at least every quarter, from pre-qualified individuals like this who are looking to invest in the area you're in or looking to get involved with the service offering that you have for them. At Marketing Material Mastery, we're going to be going through all of the different materials that you need to have in place, and we're going to break each one down into multiple parts. But today I just want to touch on a few things related to influence and persuasion related to the materials. The first one is that it's been shown that people want to not only see that others have made a similar choice. So if there's a restaurant with a long line outside, or it looks very busy inside, and there's one table open, you'd rather go eat there than the empty restaurant right next door that looks just as clean, because you figure, well, that one must be good. And it's not only that, though, it's individuals just like yourself. So if you saw in one restaurant that, that there's someone around your same age with around the same attire sitting in the restaurant, and that it's full of individuals that look like you, you're much more likely to go into that restaurant than the one next door that might be just as full, but have individuals that look different than you. Maybe they're a different age group. It looks like millennials, and you don't want to sit near them. So the point is, when you're putting together your case studies or your pitch deck or just your stories in person, you should be personalizing those stories to the individual that's there in the room. So in your pitch deck, if you are going to family offices and you have closed 3 family offices before, you should have all your examples be about how you engaged with the family office, how you developed a relationship, how long it took to get to know you, and just be transparent about that process. Because showing case studies of that is going to be much more influential than just showing that other private investors have invested. Same with stories that you tell verbally. You want to pick the ones that are most relevant to the individual that you're meeting with. Also, one thing you might have seen in one of our emails is that below the email signature, we had 40 testimonials of individuals that have been to these workshops, and we had some star ratings and another 100+ testimonials underneath those. Most people probably miss it, but having lots of testimonials just shows it's the equivalent of that star rating on Amazon. So you need to think about, how do you assure somebody that lots of investors have trusted you before? And how do you make that really tangible? A lot of individuals don't do an excellent job when they put together a pitch deck of summarizing things at a high level, and that includes all of your credibility points. It could be because you are so credible, you've never really needed to have amazing materials. You just made it look nice, but it could be much more impactful by having an infographic style where you're able to say, we've had 40 deals close, we work with 215 investors, or one group I know has a debt model. They said we've made 96 monthly payments to our investors. We've never missed a single month for the last 96 months. And being able to say that is, it adds clarity, makes it tangible, and nobody knows what you're claiming when you say that we're best in class, world-class team, we work with a lot of investors, we can't tell you their names, but they're great. It makes it much more tangible to use real numbers and tell real case studies, even if you can't use their individual private names. Those are a couple of the most important things I would put on the materials, influence-wise, just as real quick takeaways. We don't have too much time to spend on this, but the other thing is having the one-page plan that we talked about, again, in the Catalyst workshop, is to make sure you're influencing yourself and your own actions. The whole point of influence is to get somebody to take action and to have the actions go the way that you would like, and have more yeses coming towards you, more agreement, more invitation as part of that. And that's where the one-page marketing plan for raising capital comes into play, on what are the top 5 investments of your energy, what's the number 1 out of those top 5, what's your investor channel focus, what are your daily goals, what's your team's goal, and just making sure that you are doing everything possible to motivate your own team to get things done for you is part of getting all of your materials and planning in place. All right, we're going to do a quick survey now. If you don't mind getting your phones out and going to MENTI, it's menti.com. M as in mom, E, N as in Nancy, TI.com. Then you just use the code questions real quick here. So the first one is, have you attended a capital raising workshop before? I'm guessing 80% of you have. We'll see. After this first question, I'll go faster. So let's let a couple more people dial in here. Okay, so actually 40% of you have not been to one of our workshops before. So everything here, you don't have to come to the Catalyst workshop first, but it is the fundamentals of capital raising workshop. So if you haven't come to one of those first, which if you're one of the 23 here, then I would encourage you to try to attend one in the next 2 months perhaps, just while everything's fresh. Because what we talk about there, again, it's about 10 slides of overlap, but we have 93 slides in that presentation, 120 today, and there's only a little bit of overlap. The next question here, how much time have you spent studying influence? Very little to none. You've read one book or a few articles, or you've put a great deal of thought into both knowing and using influence strategies. Great, so it looks like about 80% have no exposure, or they've read one book or a couple articles. 20% of you really believe in this stuff and you're here because you know it works and you're just trying to dial it in further. But 80% of you have not applied it in a thorough manner, and that's the value, I think, in these strategies, is that a lot of us have not. And every time you think about it, you're going to gain a slight edge and be able to take it a little bit deeper. Even though I've been studying this for a long time, I'm always learning something else new that I can do in some other way to be enacting more reciprocation or more authority or more scarcity, etc. And it's the reason why in the last 2 years I've realized that the most important thing is integrity and integrating everything. Because without integrity, you don't get high conviction yourself, you have slower progress. It's harder to be a credible expert in the eyes of a third party if everything you do is not aligned and integrated. And everything is easier when things are integrated. And if you don't do influence correctly, you do it in a way that isn't genuine, isn't authentic, and you're not providing real value, and you're just doing it as a facade to get leads and then to sell something that's worthless to somebody, then it just backfires. And then you look like a used car salesman, which nobody wants to do. So this is why I think integrity is the most important thing personally in business, with family office investment, capital raising, is because that fact is foundational to everything else going well. All right, what comes to mind when you think of influence and persuasion? For some reason, it's not counting the votes on this one. I'm sure some of you have typed it in by now, right? There we go. Because it takes a minute to process, we'll give this one a minute here. All right, so this is going to keep on loading, but I actually just ruined this because I just talked about integrity and credibility and trust. So it's top of everybody's mind. And that is one of the things we're going to talk about later today from Cialdini's book, Persuasion. He talks about how there's privileged moments in time where if you focus somebody's energy on something, in that moment of time, they'll put extreme importance on that topic and it's in your brain. And then the next thing you do is going to be influenced from what I just said. And that's a perfect example that I didn't know would happen, but I should have known. I should have put that as the very first question. I should have just put that up there and didn't say anything, because I'm sure that I influenced your answer. And this will capture the results from today. At the next workshop, I'm going to make sure I don't say anything. And I bet you these words will be completely different, and integrity and credibility and trust won't be on the top there. I do see that on the negative side, there is one person or a couple people that said manipulation. I don't see too many other negative ones, which is a good thing. I see attorney, which is usually a negative thing. But manipulation, I think it's important to bring up that you can use influence to convince your wife to take the vacation she needs, or you can use it to sell somebody something that's not good. You can use it to raise a lot of capital, or you can use it for bad purposes. So it's really just being effective at communicating, and you can use that in any way you want to. But I'm glad not too many people thought about it as a manipulative thing. How much capital did you raise last year? This is going to be helpful for those of you who just really enjoy the networking at lunchtime here. We're going to be having a full hour of networking. We're going to have cocktails at 4 p.m. and do a full hour of networking then. And I hope that by coming to a couple of events per quarter, at least one event per quarter, you're going to see some familiar faces here. We've had new investment partnerships, we've had investor referrals, we've had deal referrals. We've had great relationships built over coming to the Family Office Club events consistently. I know, for example, Gunther, in your case, you've made a couple great relationships by coming to the events consistently. People know you, they get to see that you're consistent, they know what your expertise is in, and I hope that some of you get that from the networking, today at lunch and cocktails. So you can see here that about 50% of the room have raised 0 to 1 million. And then there's a good 30% that have raised 5 million or more here in the room last year, and obviously know something about capital raising because they're doing so consistently. So even though we're talking about influence today, the person you sit next to during lunch might have a strategy for raising capital that doesn't have anything to do with the presentation materials that could really help you move things forward. What level of thought leadership are you producing? We do no thought leadership. We have written some articles. We have some articles produced and some reports and webinars, or you're an expert at producing thought leadership. You do a great job at it, and it's core to who you are. All right, so it looks like about 75% produce, about 60% don't produce any thought leadership. And really, if we added the other part, just written some articles, it looks like 80, 85% don't produce much. And again, this is why it's valuable. It's because most of us don't have time. There's a lot of reasons not to do it, such as compliance, partners don't allow it, firm doesn't allow it, etc. And part of today, we talk about investor lead generation. We're going to be talking about thought leadership, but we talk about it a little bit more at the Catalyst workshop. All right. Any questions on anything I've covered up to this point today? So I'm going to go into the next section now in just a second. Okay. Yes?
What would you say is the biggest difference between pitching a VC and pitching a family office?
Sure. The biggest difference between pitching a VC and pitching a family office. I would say the number one difference would be the VC is going to have their terms in a way about how their fund is structured, how much they can allocate, so you're only 4% of their total fund. They might even have a timeline and a checklist that's pretty rigid. They might have an industry focus that is locked in stone and be less entrepreneurial. And I think that with the family office, they're more direct investment minded, more creative, more open-minded. They might have their mandate, but they might break their own rules sometimes. They might want to do a co-GP type arrangement. So I look at them more of the entrepreneurial brain if it's a single family office. And then if you go to a multi-family office, you might represent 10 or 50 different clients that are ultra wealthy. Very hard to get into, but if you just went over 1 or 2 of those relationships, you could be, could raise $50 million or $100 million from one multi-family office because they represent so many ultra wealthy clients. Or the venture capital fund, they might have a follow-on investment, but typically they won't open doors like that. That'd be the biggest difference I see. Any other questions? Okay. This next section is going to be about preparing to persuade. These are all things that are required to do very well in influence and persuasion, to set things up to go well. And we're going to get more into some practical influence principles now that you can start to implement right away today. And then in the next section is going to be some of the core influence principles, different types of them. And then after lunch, we're going to get into the one principle that we find works the best and exactly how to use it. And then in the afternoon, we're going to go into persuasive pitching and what's the best way to go through your pitch and approach the pitch from an influence perspective. All right, so on the foundation of this really working well is to know for the 40% of the people here who have not been to the Catalyst workshop, you have to know who you're pitching to. You have to know what investor you're targeting. You have to know how you're different than your competition. You have to know yourself well enough to know what you should be doing day to day on your team versus other people on your team. You really have to have analyzed the marketplace and the investor set well enough to know which influence principles make sense, are a natural fit for you, are going to be easy to deploy, not too expensive to deploy, and are the right step for where you are right now. You also have to have a genuine desire to add value, otherwise it will not work. And you also have to figure out what sandbox you're really going to own, or you're going to be building your authority on the wrong sandbox, and you're going to be investing time in an area that's not going to be high ROI. This is something I've talked about before, of making the mistake of going a bit too broad and trying to have our positioning be related to family offices instead of on single family offices or helping people start a family office. If I started out more narrow and make more progress more quickly, and then you can go more broad after making progress. Kind of the more authentic you are, while also trying to add the genuine value, the more persuasive you are. So you can be transparent, and even if your materials are lower quality, if you're transparent and you have a genuine story of how you add value and it's unique in the marketplace, that's going to persuade better than something that's a thin facade and its advisory board members aren't really on your team, but it looks really pretty. It's not going to feel real. People aren't going to feel the value inherently, and you're not going to be as passionate about it if you're not being fully transparent on it. And like I said before, if you try to shortcut what is already a shortcut for you using influence by skipping some of the parts of doing the hard work, then it's just going to completely not be worth any of your time by doing. One influence principle to think about that's really in the prepare and persuade section, because it takes some concentration, some long-term positioning, is the environment you operate in. So where is your office? Where do you live? Where do you host investor meetings? What communities are you involved with? And where do those meet? Where do you have your educational lunches or your client dinners? What restaurant is that at? Is it a private dining room at Zuma, or is it at a local restaurant? Do you put up your clients within the Sheraton Hotel or the Best Western or the Four Seasons? Some might think you should always put them up in the Four Seasons, but then some might think that you're wasteful with your money, and that depends on the investor avatar. But you're influencing their opinion on you by whether you wear a Hermes tie or whether you never wear a tie and you wear golf shorts and a shirt. They might see you more as a peer who's just like them if they don't have to dress up for work, and they are relatively casual, if that's part of your story and part of where you live and natural, and if that investor avatar doesn't suddenly lose respect for you because of that. Where I live here in Key Biscayne, nobody that works on the island wears a suit shirt and tie and suit jacket every day, because even in the middle of winter here, it's 77 degrees, and you're likely walking home from work or walking down the street for lunch, etc. Whereas just across the street in Brickell, it's different. And when I go up to events in New York or go to London, it's very different. So all of that changes based on who you are and the context of what investors are going after. We had an event just a week ago at the Harvard Club, and having an educational workshop in the Harvard Club is a much different perception of experience than having it at the Sheraton Hotel, or having it at a hotel that's decent, and maybe the carpet is actually newer than the Harvard Clubs, but it's not the Harvard Club. So it doesn't have that association that you have with it. One thing we've found is that just by having our offices based where they are, we've been able to attract family offices with it. We obviously more easily attract those who live right there next to us, and we chose a place that's full of family offices. And so choosing the environment can have one of the most great impacts of any of the influence principles, because it just naturally persuades. You don't have to say anything. It's just a decision you made on where something should occur and in what environment it occurs. And we're all influenced by this greatly. If you go to Harvard University, you go inside the library and it's very quiet, everybody automatically, naturally acts very different than if you go to a Miami Heat game and the environment is totally different. What's acceptable is different, what you drink is different, even what words you use might be different. So it's something that we're all familiar with, but we oftentimes don't take time to design really explicitly for the process of meeting with investors. And the best part about this is that it doesn't have to be about making the most money. It can be about being enjoyable, or maybe related to some passion that you have, where there's a portion of the market that plays tennis or has boats or plays golf or drives Porsches, whatever you like to do, and you can be near that thing and then make investor connections that much faster while also having more fun doing what you're doing. So I think this can be interpreted in many different ways. To enjoy what you're doing is going to make it more sustainable. And at our Catalyst workshop, we show a Venn diagram of passion, where you make a lot of money and what fits your DNA. And I talk about there that somebody's going to eat your lunch if you only have 2 out of those 3, because some person has a model that makes more money is going to be able to outspend you on advertising and build a better team. If someone's not passionate about it, and the person who is maybe going to stick to it longer and follow up more often, etc. And that's where this comes into play, is that it can give you a more personal ROI on top of the business ROI. Where we're based, everybody is outside all the time. You actually want to go outside. I used to be in Oregon. There's no family offices, and you never could be outside except for 4 months a year. The rest of the year was gray, rainy, and you had to travel to meet with family offices. So for us, it's been a dramatic change, and we've more than tripled our business since we moved out of a place with no family offices to a place where there are lots of them. They've shown in a scientific study that in a classroom seating area, they had just little placards of MasterCard and Visa up on 2 of the 4 walls, and just having the credit card symbols in the room upped the amount of transactions that was done by 15%. So little cues of credibility, or little cues of, in this case, that credit cards are accepted. You don't have to spend your cash. You can just put it on a credit card, and they've shown that people are more likely to spend when they know they can put it on a credit card. They don't have to pay for it right now. Those little things can make an increased difference. And if you only did the 2 or 3 ideas in this pre-persuasion section that are not just getting ready, but actual things that are influential, I really think you would have that unfair advantage, because dialing this in is something that can provide a good ROI. We have in our office the glass wall built out areas for our team, but then we also have a boardroom with some artificial turf and some white and chrome chairs, and then we have plaques on the wall of about 20 different events that we've ran over the past 10 years, and different cover pages, like the one you have in front of you, and we took off the cover page and put those on the wall. So you can see some of them that we did in the Harvard Club back in 2008 or 2010, and you can see the ones that we've done on single family offices, and also the ones on real estate. And that way, when we have a meeting there, we not only show them the bookshelf of the books we've written, but I can refer to one and grab it, give them to it, and enact a sense of reciprocation. The room is just built to have a sense of authority because it's clean. There's no papers in there. There's no employees walking by. It's very quiet. And it's the authority, the reciprocation, and then being able to customize what the person came to the office for and show them that event or two and make it very tangible and real, and show them that we've been doing this a long time and this is what we do. So if they would like help with it, we can. That's an example of using environment to have a place where things are going to go your way more often than if you were just in a room with white walls, or you're just in a room that was in the back of our office that my team uses for the break table or the lunch table. It doesn't have those components. All it has is a bookshelf near it, but it doesn't feel as nice. It doesn't feel as comfortable either. Any questions on environment and how to apply it to what you're doing? All right, so this is one of my favorite sections of the day. This is a picture of Earl Nightingale, which maybe a few of you know who he is. But essentially, he's one of the first kind of self-improvement experts. If you think Tony Robbins, but 50 years ago or 60 years ago, and this is one of the cases where he was just a self-improvement individual who sold millions of copies of his book, and he's one of the first audio recordings ever in the self-improvement space. And he wasn't just successful at selling it, but now it's been proven that what he was saying is actually true. And what he's saying is that what you think about most of the time is what you're likely to become. And they've shown through a lot of studies that if you think a certain way, you're often going to think that way again and again. And if something is in the front part of your brain, you're going to filter things through it. And you're going to see things through that lens. I hope after today you see things through a bit more of an influence lens of how you could approach a situation or reply to an email or help somebody to ask you for a favor. But just like when we did the top of mind words, and I just talked about integrity and trust and credibility, and then those came up on the screen, when you think about things, it influences what you think about next and propels you towards that location. And we've proven this in hundreds of studies now. There's a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini I'm going to show in the next section. There's some examples in there, but the whole point is that the inputs into your brain on some level equal the outputs. That's why if you go to psychotherapy, they start at your childhood. That's why, if you're having a bad day, someone says, what happened? What happened before to make you feel like you do right now? And the things you consume in terms of conversations, media, books, videos, workshops, the type of business people you meet with, the types of documentaries or shows that you watch, etc., are going to change your thoughts and your interpretation of everything else. If every night you watch, an hour of Breaking Bad versus an hour of something that was very specific, like for the next year, if every night you watched an hour on influence and persuasion, and you did 365 hours of that, it's going to change the way your brain works versus watching an hour every night of Breaking Bad and House of Cards. Not to say that your brain might not benefit more from actually relaxing and just going kind of brain dead and enjoying something, but it is going to change what got into your brain and change what comes out the other side. And they've shown that within studies. And one of the most helpful books on that topic is written by Carol Dweck. She's written a book called The Growth Mindset. And her book is about how some people just get stuck and they can't change and they can't innovate and they don't change their skills, they don't change their abilities, they don't change their attitudes, they don't change how they approach things or their career, while other people are always changing. Other people just have a mindset that they can change and they can grow and adapt. And she gives many examples of this, and she has examples in there of how to break out of not changing and how to be more adaptive to your environment. And when we talked about speed of implementation during the last section in the Capital Raising Catalyst workshop, which some of you were at, this is about that. It's about changing as you go and influencing yourself as you move forward so you can adapt to what is around you. Jeffrey Gitomer talks about how life is unfair, and that's the good news, is that you can make it unfair for yourself, or you can make it not unfair for yourself, and that things aren't equal for everybody. And because that is the truth, then you can tilt the scales in your direction and make them unfair for yourself. There's also a saying that in 2 years, you'll be the result of your 5 closest friends. That one's just kind of a non-scientific study saying that people say, but then they've scientifically proven something much more meaningful. They've shown that even if you don't have any of your closest 5 friends that smoke, and none of your friends smoke, but one of a friend of a friend of a friend smokes, you're more likely to start smoking during your life. And they've shown that's true with smoking, obesity, and divorce. Because they've shown it seeps through the social fabric of even if none of your friends have gotten a divorce, if they know 2 people that were their best friends and they got divorces, on some level, it's either accepted or thought as normal or thought as something that just happens and you have to deal with it. And so they've just shown that with smoking and divorce and obesity, that you're more likely to be overweight if you have a friend of a friend who's overweight. And it's just a scientific fact. It's not like an argument. And that's what's interesting about some of these statements. It's kind of everyone's tired of hearing like, oh yeah, you're going to turn into the top 5 friends you have, but it's even more of that. It's even the friends of your friends. So it just shows how powerful the influences are of who you spend your time with and what you choose to spend your time doing. Are those positive things, or are those things holding you back and hurting your ability to meet new investors and generate good relationships with them? And I hope that by coming here, you're able to identify a couple of investor relations, accountability partners, friends, people you can do business with, refer deals with, keep in touch with, to have some people that are going to help push you forward, and figuring out who you can select and regulate as who's going to influence you. Who are you going to listen to? Who are you following on Twitter? What email newsletters are you listening to? what news are you deciding to consume? There's many people that that I know now that just have a total fast from the media, and when something really important happens, they hear it from their wife, their colleagues, etc., and it seeps through because it's so important. They have to know, and if it's not niche on their industry, then they don't want to read about perhaps what's happening somewhere else around the world, or in the chicken farming industry, or what's happening in politics, or what's happening with the soccer star who had an affair. You know, it's not helping their life. It's not helping them meet their goals, and they just take a fast from the media. I did this for 2 different years. One year, what I did was every day on the way to work while raising capital, I had the summary chapter of 10 different Brian Tracy books, and I had it on an 80-minute audio loop, and I just listened to that every day on my commute to work and back. And later on, I got to meet him and interview him. I've got a podcast episode with him. And then also, I've also done before where I've chosen a single author who's written a lot. And for 1 year, I'll only read books by that one author. And I'll read 10 books or 12 books from that one author, go and see them speak in person, and just really get into their brain and like how they got things to work for them, what they're doing. And that way, I might still buy books and have a pile of them for the next year to read, but then for 1 year, I'm just trying to adopt the best practices and the strategies of this one person without it being clouded by conflicting strategies or strategies that weren't right for me. And the important part about that is that there's 2 ways to interpret what I just said. One is to figure out who is where you want to be, or who has the skills or the success you want to implement. But the other flip side of that is thinking about how you can be that person or that guide for a specific investor type. How could you be so helpful that potential investors want to come and hear you talk? They want to read your next article, or they want to read your white paper. And what propels people to really grasp something that is like that is that Wall Street Journal is generic. Even Inc. magazine is pretty generic. But if you have something very specific to what your investors' challenges are, and you're hitting them right between the eyes because you're talking about an area that's of very high interest, or a challenge of high interest, or you're talking about their exact investor type. So you're saying that if you are a Silicon Valley tech employee that had early stage shares, and now Facebook's gone public, etc., and your wealth has been created from that, here are things to consider on taxation. Here's how to sell your shares in the secondary market. Here's the next 7 unicorns that we see coming along. And you could be talking just to that investor set, and then they may not choose to block out all other generic media. That's how you break through and become the top of somebody's list on what they're going to read, is you are being a scarce resource in the focus of your energy and providing value to the potential investor. And I think that's an important point here, because you can't do that unless you have that focus, and most investment firms don't put any energy into doing so. Brian Tracy says that you can have this camera right here that you bought for $6 at a hotel on vacation and take better pictures than somebody with a $50,000 ESPN camera if that person's not allowed to do one thing and it's focused. So having little resources is what I started with, and it's by focusing, laser focusing, we were able to make progress. So we don't help people in managing their wealth. We don't help people in just running their family office. We're helping people start their family office and formalize it. And we're not helping them with stocks and bonds and getting access to ETFs, because I feel like that's commoditized. We help them just with the direct investment program part, which most 99% of all multifamily offices and wealth management firms completely fail at helping ultra wealthy clients on that part. So we have this niche focus. Another example is our certified hedge fund professional program, or our family office certification. When we came out with the hedge fund certification, is because I realized there was the CFA and the KAYA, both reputable certification programs. They both have the word analyst in the name of them. If you don't want to be an analyst your whole life, you either don't want to take the certification, or it's just going to be painful studying for it. It might equip you with great quality skills, but it's also a multi-year time investment. And if all you want to do is work in hedge funds, and you never want to be an analyst, there was no certification program for you. So we created one, the hedge fund certification program, and we've been able to enroll 2,500 participants in that program for $500 to $1,000 a piece over the past 9 years. And it's because we focused. We went up against the CFA. Last time I looked, they're doing $120 million a year in revenue as a nonprofit. So they're a huge giant in the space, like much more credible in terms of like social proof and acceptance, and everyone knows them than we could ever be, but because we focused, it stood out to the individual that fit that demographic. All right, so this is one of my favorite slides because it's one of the ways I've used influence to change the results that I get working with investors. And there's literally 50 different ways to interpret this, and it's going to be different for each one, of the 60 or 70 people here in the room. So I hinted at this a couple slides ago when I talked about media fasting and focusing just on one source, changing your inputs. But there's all different ways to influence yourself that's different than when you're communicating with a counterparty. And you can use this to be influencing your team or yourself directly. And I'm just going to go through a list of different ones and touch base on why some of them work. One thing is just to have, the one thing focus is to figure out what is the thing that matters more than anything else. The first domino that's going to knock things over and allow you to meet with new investors all the time and make more progress in capital raising, and just have that be written down somewhere where you see it every day, or have a reminder that comes up every day in your calendar, or you do that first in your day when you get to the office. And if you do that, then you are manipulating yourself into just never forgetting about it because you've identified what's going to be most powerful. You now have changed your own actions by taking one single action of identifying that top priority. Another one is there's a book called The Success Principles that's got about 55 different principles of things you can do to live your life more successfully, and about 10 of them are related to influence. And reading one of those per night, one chapter per night of those principles, the last thing in your brain before bed is going to help influence your behavior the next day. Changing your surroundings, we already talked about relocating to a place that is either more enjoyable, more productive for family offices, or both. One change I made about 3 months ago is to change physiologically not having coffee anymore. It was cut out coffee, and I have green vegetable shakes instead. And for the first week, I felt like a zombie, and then I felt better after that. And I think that it's just an example of making a small tweak, and you're literally changing the inputs to get better outputs the other side. Putting rewards in place for your team, and putting like the Brian Tracy audio recording on the way to work every day, and putting I put a list of goals, and I'd have it where I brush my teeth every day. I'd have it when I get to the office every day. It'd just be my goals for the year, because psychologically, there's scientifically proven studies behind doing all these things. They look like we're going to go over in my next section 5 influence principles from Cialdini, and interpret all of them for your pitch book, interpret all of them for the investor meetings. And I know a lot of you are coming for that, not something that sounds like self-improvement, soft stuff, but all of these have been proven of if it's top of mind and if you just run into it naturally, if you see it all of the time, if you write it down every day, it's going to be top of mind, and you're going to be thinking about it all the time, and you're going to be taking action on it more often. And they're just proven that that is the case. Also, if you do meditation already, meditating on that number one goal, they've proven that those who visualize, for example, making 10 shots in basketball, are scientifically proven to make 15%, 20% more of those baskets if they visualize the free throw first before just doing it. So again, these things are proven scientific principles that you can act on for yourself. And while the whole next section is going to be influencing others, the most leverage comes on influencing yourself, because it doesn't even require getting a meeting or getting contacts. A lot of the influence world talks about stages of influence, but it's very hard to influence anybody if you're not in the meeting first, or if you don't have their contact details yet, or if you don't know who's investing in what, and you have no traction on getting started, then a lot of the influence and persuasion work out there is quite meaningless unless you first have the ability to position yourself to get that interaction going in the first place. So we want to do a quick exercise on this just for 10 minutes, and what we want to do is just talk about how you're going to influence yourself, whether it's changing what you consume, changing who you have meetings with, changing what type of podcasts you listen to, or books you read, or events you go to, etc. But how are you going to change your inputs to get a better output on having more energy to get your investor relations work done, or having more investor relationships naturally connecting with you all the time. The last example I'll give is that changing one input could literally be, instead of going to the golf place down the street, or maybe there's a golf club you've been delaying on joining that you know would be productive for business. It's also just a nicer golf club, more enjoyable club atmosphere and restaurant, etc. And you would be changing the inputs of who you're networking with and your own kind of feeling of positioning and authority by being a more prestigious golf club, if it would make sense for business-wise and enjoyment as well. So that might be something that would be something for yourself. So let's introduce yourself. Somebody you did not come to the workshop with here today, and let them know one or two things you're doing to influence yourself to be more productive in raising capital or in investor relations, and then we'll move on to the next section. So we'll come back here at 11:45.
I do.
Okay, just 2 more minutes and we'll get started again. All right, let's start taking your seats. Let's talk about this for 1 or 2 minutes, and we're going to have our guest speaker come up. Does anybody want to give an example of how they're going to start influencing themselves differently? Do they want to share? Anyone want to share with the room what they're doing to influence themselves differently? I'll give one example for myself. We are, with the Simple Millionaire Migraines book, our goal is to advise on $1 billion in new family office assets in 2019. And if I do that, then I'm going to buy this card here and just making it visual. Just reminds me of that, reminds me of that priority. There's always a lot of things going on, a lot of people on the team to manage. These days, a new project's coming up, but that's the most important thing. So I have that just as a visual reminder. Honestly, getting to the $1 billion in assets is much more important to me than the car and is more rewarding. Maybe I'll even get there and decide not to get it, but I have it as kind of a visual reminder of the reward to do it. And again, these things up here are proven that if they're top of your mind, if they're in front of your mind, if you're reminded often by it, if it's an input daily into your brain, then it's going to affect your output. And they've shown that it's like water running over the desert. The first time you have a thought, the water is barely cutting through the dirt. And then after you've thought it 50 times or 100 times, that is the way you think. That is the way you interpret things, because you've dug a canyon through the desert with your mental thoughts. And it's shown that that's the way our neural pathways work. That's why we're creatures of habit. That's why we do things a certain way. You go to an exercise class, you probably pick out the same bike at the same spot almost every time. Probably get dressed in the same type of way, go to work in the same type of way, start a meeting in the same type of way. That's all because of the psychological permanency of the way that we think is customized to who you are and your background and experiences. Anyone want to share something that they are going to be doing differently based on this? No one's feeling very outspoken today, I guess. Well, after lunch, we're going to go through 5 influence principles that all of you will be able to apply to raising capital. We're going to talk about the most important one, provide many examples of that. We're going to talk about persuasive pitching, about influence and lead generation related to influence. So we've got probably 80 more slides that we're going through. And this is all a setup for what we're going to be talking about post-lunch. And probably the hour right after lunch is going to be a lot of the meat that is going to allow you to just look through a different lens at each meeting you go to, et cetera. At this point, we're going to have Clint come up, and he's going to be talking about authority. And I didn't know exactly what words were going to come out last week when he spoke at a workshop, and but it's exactly related to one of the influence principles that we've already talked about many times today. We're going to be talking about after lunch. So I think after he spoke, we were happily surprised to see that there's just a great overlap in what he does and what he's been doing for the last several years, and what we're talking about here today, and how we grew the Family Office Club. So with that, let's welcome Clint up here to the stage.
Yes, 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 yes. What a great morning presentation. Richard, I enjoyed it more this time than I did the first time I heard it. I want to go over a couple of his, the high points that I filled out of his presentation. He says, you can have a great offer and yet raise no capital. Who here thinks they have a great offer? Okay, that's good. That's part of it. It's only part of it. He says the more authority you have, the more influence you have. He says you need social proof. He said authority positioning is what today is all about. That's what this whole day is all about, authority positioning. He says there's no reward for second. Good golly, how sad when you come in second. You did so great, and yet you get nothing. Very sad. The 80-20 thing. He said 80% of your time should be spent on what? Anybody remember? Positioning. 80% of your time should be spent on positioning. He says you need to create an unfair advantage, like that grizzly bear. If you invest in positioning, then the fish will jump right into your mouth. Remember that part? He's also talked about speaking a lot. Obviously speaking is one of his positioning tools. See, what I like to do when I have mentors, and I definitely consider this man to be a mentor, when I have mentors, I like to do what the mentors are doing. Then he also talked about top-of-mind awareness, tools for top-of-mind awareness, tools for top-of-mind awareness. Then it was something really interesting. Who knows what the most used word in his presentation was this morning? Number one word. He said more than any other word. No. It was said 9 times. Harvard. Harvard. What I'm here to talk to you about today is unfair competitive advantage. If you don't like unfair competitive advantage, if you don't want unfair competitive advantage, you're not going to like this presentation. I'm going to start off by talking about how to decimate your competition. It's a tough world out there, and I'm just not interested in pussyfooting around. This is about decimating competition. This is about Warren Buffett's secret for a 50% lifetime income boost. This is about instant thought leadership and unique positioning so that you can do the 80-20 that he was talking about. This presentation is about the 80. Then this is about the most important thing in business, the lesson. It took me 13 years to learn the lesson. The most important thing in business. And then a done-for-you 5-minute solution that I'm here to provide for you. When I met Mike Tyson, he told me, everybody's got a plan until I punch him in the face. What I'm here to talk to you about today is about how you can punch your competition in the face like you're Mike Tyson. That's the unfair competitive advantage I'm talking about. This message has brought me to Harvard multiple times for events sponsored by the Entrepreneurship Club of Harvard Business School. Suzanne Summers was at that event. It's taken me to West Point, where I've shared this message with leaders of our nation's future. Apollo astronaut and West Point graduate Buzz Aldrin was there with me at that event as another speaker. George Ross. Imagine how smart you have to be the executive vice president and consigliere to a billionaire real estate developer in New York City, in his case, Donald Trump, for 42 years. Imagine how smart you have to be. He was at the Harvard Club of Boston as a speaker with me when I was there last year sharing this message. I share it at NASDAQ. Great place to talk. I've shared this message at Coca-Cola and Microsoft. On TV, 102 times I've shared my message. And how do you decimate the competition? When I shared this message at the University of Southern California's Business School Entrepreneurship Department, that's the Lloyd Grief, that's the Lloyd Grief Center for Entrepreneurial Studies. My daughter came with me. She was a junior at USC at the time. They gave us each one of these hats, and the hat is how you decimate the competition. Look, I study entrepreneurship. I'm a graduate of Wharton Entrepreneurship Program. this is all I do. That logo is the recipe, the formula for decimating competition. You have to be completely different than everybody else who's doing what you do. Raise your hand if you've got competition doing exactly what you do or similar to what you do. Raise your hand. Look around the room. Look around the room. Everybody does. There's so much competition. You want to decimate the competition, you have to be seen as different and higher status. How do you create higher status? How do you get them to think that you're better? That's what this presentation is about. Warren Buffett.
Complicated stuff with MBA. But if you improve your communication skills, I will guarantee you that you'll earn 50% more money over your lifetime. And I said it's kind of beneath the business school to teach you about speaking better, writing better, but that is what counts. There isn't going to be no sort of Latin formula about options or something. And so I tell every one of them, I said, unless you really think you're good at this now, go out and improve your communication skills.
Unless you really think you're good at this, you really got to go out. And even I think I'm pretty good as a communicator, and I'm constantly investing lots of money and learning from the best people I can about how to be a better speaker and communicator, because I'm just following Warren Buffett's advice because I want to increase my lifetime income by 50%, even though my video won't play. We'll give it one more shot. It won't play. Joel Weldon, National Speakers Association Hall of Fame member, he told me, and in this video he says that I'm in the top 1% of money earners in the National Speakers Association, and I am constantly going for speaker training to learn how to speak better so I can have more impact, influence, and income. Speaking. Who's a speaker? Raise your hand if you consider yourself a speaker. Only a few. Maybe that might be a clue for you on how you can help to differentiate yourself from other people who are doing exactly what you're doing and to be higher status. Because when you are a speaker, your family and friends will look at you with admiration because they're too chicken to get up and do it. And so will your clients. If you're on a platform, it gives you much more authority and credibility. And then your industry positioning will change as well. You won't just be another person in the industry, you'll be a leader in the industry, just from being a speaker. But what I'm talking about today, the unfair competitive advantage is to be a VIP speaker. VIP speaking is not what you think it is. It is valuable, it is instantaneous in its impact, and it does create preeminence for you. That's VIP. What is VIP speaking? It is speaking in very important places, with very important people, and telling very important parables. I invented this, VIP speaking. I created that whole concept. Places, people, parables. That's the VIP. What are some places that are very important? Well, how about NASDAQ? Is that a very important place? Anybody in the financial industry here? Raise your hands. Yep. Would that be good for you to speak at NASDAQ? For sure. How about the Harvard Club of Boston? If you could attach and start using the word Harvard in your presentations. People. Who are some very important people? Well, Suzanne Summers is a pretty good one. Raise your hand if you know who Suzanne Summers is. Just raise your hand if you know who she is. Look around the room. Everybody knows who she is. That's the value. There's one of my clients, Mike Martinez, the pension group. He spoke at our event at Harvard. He spoke at our event at NASDAQ.
That's truly that's how you grow personally as well as professionally. You have to be uncomfortable, because if we're just doing the same status quo, guess what? We're not growing. And that's one of the things I really kind of take from that. And as I tell a lot of people, I retire, and they retire from Honda, whatnot. They're part of the Honda family. They come with us. They're part of the pension group family. Well, you're part of Clinton Alley's family now, under their wing, from that standpoint. So, as far as personally, there's been a lot of changes, a lot of growth. From me, business-wise, there's been huge growth, and probably in the first quarter of this year, I've already done more in production in one quarter than I did all last year. And
Quadrupling revenues, tripling, doubling, 10 times, 20 times. These are the kinds of things that happen when you're a VIP speaker or position yourself as a VIP speaker. And then the parables. Here's what you think is the Last Supper. I'll tell you what this really was. This was really a dinner seminar recruiting downline into his word-of-mouth marketing organization. See? And it's been very successful. That dinner, that one downline recruitment dinner, has endured for thousands of years. That's the power of telling parables. When you tell stories from your own life, it attracts the people who are the people who get it, and it repels the people who don't get it. Storytelling. Storytelling as the most powerful form of marketing. And I've been telling stories for many, many years. This was my classroom in high school. Any Angela's Ashes or Frank McCourt fans in the room? Yes, good, very nice. He was my creative writing teacher for 2 years. That was our classroom, and Frank used to tell us stories. We loved that guy because he would just tell us stories about his life when he was a poor child in Ireland, and then he went on to write a book about it and won the Pulitzer Prize and millions of dollars and became an international celebrity just from telling the stories about his life as a poor child in Ireland. And that's what really got me into storytelling. That's what attracted me into wanting to be a storyteller. And when I was in Stuyvesant High School, I made up my mind that I was going to go. I read this book, and in the book, the character was someone who went to the Wharton Business School, and I said, I want to go to the Wharton Business School. I looked it up in the encyclopedia. It was a real thing, the best business school in the world, and I said, if I could go to the Wharton Business School, maybe I could become somebody special. And maybe my parents would stop arguing so much. Your parents ever argue when you were growing up? Yes? With us, it was like, when weren't they arguing? Right? So I go to the Wharton Business School, I get in early decision, I graduate with a 4.0 GPA in entrepreneurship, and I go home to get the attaboys, and what happens? They get into the biggest argument of all time. My dad storms out of the house, slams the door. I'm sitting on the couch in my living room where I grew up my whole life. And I don't know where this came from. I just look at my mom, and I say, you know, Mom, the way he resents you all these years, have you been cheating on Dad? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what kind of a smart aleck kid asks his own mom a rude question like that? And then I'm thinking, why ain't she answering the question? He's not your real father. Your real father was a doctor at the fertility clinic we went to for 6 years when we were trying to have you, and he looked just like him. Say what, Mom? Imagine how you would feel. Everything you thought you knew about who you were, in a split second, poof. I sure as heck didn't know who I was anymore, and I sure as double heck didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up anymore. So what did I do? I call up the investment bank on the 87th floor, the #1 World Trade Center, and I say to the vice president, sir, thank you so much for the offer, but I've decided I don't want to be an investment banker anymore. And what do I do next? Naturally, I move out to Hollywood. Start going on auditions, screenplay writing. 13 years banging my head against the brick wall of the Hollywood dream. This is what that really actually looks like. December 31st, 1999, were you at an ATM getting your Y2K cash? I was driving yellow cab number 6087 that night. In the back seat were 2 MBA interns at Goldman Sachs. They're talking about a high-level executive, and I'm listening in. Hey, did you hear about Mr. Carrera? They made him the last partner before the Goldman IPO, and he cashed out $100 million. Hey, you guys talking about Chris Carrera? How do you know Mr. Carrera? Chris Carrera was a pledge in my fraternity. When I was a pledge master, I used to make those little punks dance around the living room of their house with their tidy whities on top of their heads. And now he just cashed out $100 million, and I'm behind the wheel. That was the turning point for me, guys. That night, it was the waterworks. I soaked the pillow. I said, how much more can I keep throwing away my life chasing a dream that's never going to happen? And I quit writing, quit acting, and focused on making money. And I look back on that whole ordeal, 13 years of my life. What was it for? It was for me to learn the most important lesson in business. They don't teach it at Wharton. They don't teach it in any business school. Who you are is way more important than what you actually do. We could theorize that I was a better actor than Tom Cruise, Nicolas Cage, Arnold Schwarzenegger. There's a million people you could theorize that I was a better actor, but I was nobody. and they were them. Who you are is more important than what you actually do. And it's the same thing with your investors, with family offices. They're looking for who you are. What is your status? What is your credibility? What is your positioning? What is your authority? Who are you? Why should I trust you with my money? One of my mentors is Dan Kennedy. Any Dan Kennedy fans in the room? Yes, good. Dan said, hey, my wife broke her wrist. I knew she needed an operation. The only thing I didn't know was who was going to be the guy. That's the high net worth thought process about making a big dollar investment in something. Who's going to be the guy? And that's the lesson I had to learn. And I wasn't Tom Cruise. I wasn't Arnold Schwarzenegger. But I'm not telling you you have to be a movie star. You don't. You don't have to be famous. What you have to do is create positioning in the eyes of your customers and prospects that you're a celebrity. Is there anybody in this room who would like to compete head-to-head against that guy, Kenneth Fisher? Now, one person would want to compete with Kenneth Fisher because he's a celebrity expert entrepreneur at what he does. How about this guy? Any Uncle G fans in the room? Anybody know Grant Cardone? A couple. It's funny. Oh, this room knows who he is. I did a speech at the Harvard Club last week. Nobody knew who he was. Fascinating. But in your eyes, you wouldn't want to compete with Grant Cardone. Not a chance. That's the kind of power you can get. And look, when I met the Rolling Stones, I said, Sir Mick, what's the most important thing you ever learned? He said, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you just might find you get what you need. And I know you didn't come here wanting to be a VIP speaker or a celebrity entrepreneur in the eyes of your customers and prospects. You probably didn't want that. But I'm telling you, if you want to succeed, that's what you need. So that nobody will even want to compete with you. They'll say, I can't compete with Grant Cardone. I got to find another niche to play in. This is an advantage that will break your competition. You want them to not even think about competing against you.
Has our work together been helping you to close new business?
Yes. I had a client I hadn't worked with in about 10 to 12 years. He saw the Harvard video, and he wanted to meet. After the Harvard video, that's a $95,000 deal. This March, this year, I doubled revenues and doubled profits.
That's what's possible when you start dropping in Harvard. Who's getting this? Anybody getting this? Yes? You start dropping in Harvard and authority positioning, and it changes what is possible.
Hey, I'm here at Harvard, Clint's Harvard event, and I just closed a $60,000 deal, all due to me mentioning Harvard in our closing. Thank you very much.
Just mentioning it, and you have to mention it in the right way. He mentions it very well. Richard mentions it very well. It's called dropping the H-bomb. Anybody who graduates from Harvard. Any Harvard graduates in here? One? Dropping the H-bomb? You ever talk about that? That's what I've been told.
Result of attending Clint Arthur's event, we have quadrupled our sales. In fact, in this quarter, 2017, we've already done more business this year than we did all of last year. So if you're wanting to take your business to the next level, or your celebrity status to the next level, you got to get with Clint Arthur.
That guy invented this technique. When people call, Kevin, how has this been working for you? When people call into his call center, the person answering the phone says, oh, you're interested in working with us to repair your credit? Great. Do you mind if I ask how you found out about us? Did you see our CEO's speech at Harvard or at NASDAQ? See what that question does? Of course they haven't seen the speech. But now, there's no other credit counselors who've shared their message at Harvard or at NASDAQ. Who's getting this? Yes? Yes? Good. Very good.
I did the math, and sort of NASDAQ altogether will be a total about $925,000 of new revenue just from speaking to NASDAQ.
Less than a year. That's the kind of photographic imagery we give you so that you can have top-of-mind awareness, authority, and credibility by speaking at NASDAQ. He's actually over 1.2 million in new revenues this year as a result of speaking at NASDAQ.
Hey, this is Gary Typos coming to you from Silicon Valley, California, and I'll just say I had my best month ever in October, and one of the main reasons why was because of Clint Arthur's NASDAQ event. Before the event, I sent my prospects all sorts of information that I was going to New York, I was going to speak at the NASDAQ, and then of course while I was there, I gave them updates, my prospects and my clients, and then of course I had that wonderful video of my speech at the NASDAQ, which was a little bit rough, but thanks to Allie, she edited it and made me look like a star, much better than what actually happened at the NASDAQ. But that's another story. But thank you, Allie, for the great editing. And I sent that out, and my clients went, wow. My prospects said, yes, I need to speak to this guy. So I'll tell you, if you're thinking, just even thinking about doing Clint's event, stop thinking, just do it. Because I'll tell you, it gets results. And so thank you, Clint. Thank you, Allie. It was a fantastic event. Record-breaking month for the past 15 years, the best month ever. Thank you.
My wife creates all the videos. You got to have great professional videos. You got to have great professional videos. Because one little chink in the armor and they just go to the next deal on the stack. And my wife was chair of the Producers Guild of America, and she produces all of our videos and photos so that you get 100% top quality stuff. The 5-minute solution I talked about. If you want the unfair competitive advantage, if you want to be positioned as a top financial authority with top financial credibility, would that image ever stop being valuable to you? If you had an image of you in front of your own book cover or headshot on the NASDAQ Jumbotron in Times Square, how long would that work for you? 5 years, 10 years? Would it ever stop? I don't think so. And our NASDAQ, what I do is I mentor people into being VIP speakers. And if you do it at NASDAQ, it includes 5 minutes at the NASDAQ podium, a 3-camera broadcast quality video and all rights to use it, HD professional photos, 75-foot tall Times Square Jumbotron photos, and high net worth networking with my other clients who are also being VIP mentors, and the directory of all attendees and VIP speaker training. It includes a day of speaker training, and it also includes me creating your speech for you. What are you going to say? I'll tell you exactly what to say. Don't worry about it. And I'll even perform it for you. A private speech consult with me where I record your story for you and give you the audio. So you can just mimic my performance and you'll be amazing. So that's one of the bonuses. I met her last week and she enrolled for NASDAQ. She'll be speaking at NASDAQ February.
Okay. Oh, you're a genius, Clint. I'm so glad I met you.
You like that?
I do. It's extra. It's dynamite.
Yeah. It's a
Dynamite.
She's got this thing. She recycles bras. She's been selling bras and intimate apparel on QVC for 25 years. She's put like X millions of bras into the world. Now she recycles them into carpet padding. And I wrote her speech for her that she's going to be delivering at NASDAQ. Then I also give you an award. If you come to our event at Harvard, then I give you an award at the Harvard Club that will help you to have more impact, influence, and income. Anything that can create distinction for you is super valuable. You also become a best-selling author with a chapter. We take your speech and make it a chapter in our book, and we guarantee it'll be a bestseller on Amazon, guaranteed. It's just part of what we do. I asked Snoop Dogg. I said, Snoop, what's the most important thing you ever learned? He said, life's too short to smoke cheap weed. Now, I've been sober for 5 years, okay? Completely stone cold sober. And I just look at Snoop's response as a good metaphor for living. Things that are really good cost money, and life's too short not to get the good stuff, and that's the only kind of stuff that I'm interested in delivering. I look back on this whole journey, and I think about, what's really been driving me. And I've been hoping, on a subconscious level, that I was going to get so famous that maybe my real dad would see me, maybe daddy would love me, and it hasn't happened yet, even after 102 TV appearances. But the times when I've come closest to healing the wound have been the times that I've been able to share my message and help people to have more impact and influence. When my friends have been able to go on big shows or big stages to share their message and increase their impact and influence to live their dreams. Now, maybe you're not looking for your father, but you're probably looking for investors or customers or clients that you can help. And that's what this kind of unfair advantage will enable you to do in a way that you can't even imagine. You'll be sending me text messages that say, Clint, I'm living my dream, and that's why I do what I do. and I'm looking forward to doing that for you. I'll be here all day. See those banners over there with me, 75 feet tall in the NASDAQ with me? Thank you, Richard.
Great job, Clint. Just had a couple quick notes before we break for lunch. One is a note about who you are is more important than what you do. I think that the point is there might be many orthopedic surgeons or hand surgeons, might be many commercial real estate niche experts in self-storage, and there could be 6 in a region to be credible enough to do a great job for a family office. But the one who's going to win the allocation, then it comes down to who you are. Because you do need to be good, obviously, at what you do, but that's a given, that's the table stakes. But then to actually win the business, to motivate someone to de-risk the relationship, and then it comes down to who you are. Also, Grant Cardone spoke at our Super Summit, and he's not just social media personality with sales training, he's also raising, his goal is $100 million this year using social media, using his authority positioning, which I think is an interesting side note. Also, someone else similar to some of those pictures was Gary Vaynerchuk, who's grown to $100 million plus a year businesses, again, using authority positioning. When we talk about 80-20 investment, energy into raising capital, I know some of you might knee-jerk say, well, that's impossible. I'm running the deal, I'm sourcing the deal, I'm closing the deal. What we're talking about is that compartment of time. Whatever amount of time you dedicate to raising capital, it's going to be more effective and more intelligently spent if 80% of it is spent, at least in the short term, on positioning, on being more influential, on being more effective, on being more efficient, rather than just reaching out trying to meet with as many investors as you want to figure out how to position yourself to get more. So even if it's 5 hours a week, you should be spending 4 hours of that on the positioning and attracting versus chasing, is what we're saying, not that you can give up the part of actually running your investment management firm. Other quick point is that when Clint talks about authority, it's scientifically proven and shown that a type of monkey called a rhesus monkey, they will actually pay using food. They'll pay for the right just to view with their eyes a monkey that's high authority status in their society. And you have to pay them to even look at a low status monkey in their social groups. That's pretty interesting, I think. And also that it's just interesting hearing someone like Clint speak. He has a business and helping people be positioned as an authority, but he thinks about it so much, you can also see how he positions himself as an authority by speaking, by being on NASDAQ, by associating himself with the Harvard Club. So I think it's interesting to watch on a couple levels, and it wouldn't work. If authority didn't work, then you wouldn't be in the seat today. And if these principles didn't work, then you wouldn't have replied to the email and got on the phone with my team. So I encourage you to stay after lunch because we have a lot of the meat of the presentation coming right after you come back from lunch. I think you guys are going to really enjoy that content. It's going to help you get more investor contacts initially interacting with you. The meetings are going to go better, follow up stronger, and more investors close. And we're going to provide you 5 different lenses to look through to make that happen right after lunch. So 12:15 now. I want to give you guys a full hour to network, enjoy your lunch, hopefully meet some people you didn't come to the event here with today. We'll start back here at 1:15 on the content, but we're going to make sure we get done right at 4 p.m. for cocktails. I know some of you have to leave at 5 for flights and such. So thanks for your attention. We'll see you back here in 60 minutes.